Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the Brookings County Equalization meeting, April 8th, 2025. We'll start the meeting. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I'd like to mention we do have Sean Hostler on the phone for attending the meeting. Item number 4 on the agenda is an invitation for a citizen to schedule time in the commission. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A motion and a second. Any additions or corrections?
Yes, we'll have an addition to the agenda. Under the corrections, Section 8, we'll add letter K, action to approve a correction to Josh Slider.
Any other comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 4 on the agenda is an invitation for a citizen to schedule time on the commission agenda for an item not listed. There's a 5-minute time limit per person. Anyone wanting to speak during the agenda item must sign in prior to the start of the meeting. No commission action will be taken during this agenda item. Any requested action item may be scheduled for a future meeting date. I don't believe we have anybody signed in this morning. Okay. Item number 5 is oaths of office. County Board of Equalization member oath. Okay. Everybody will sign them and turn them in, please.
Do we need to wait till 8:40?
That's probably wise, since the second person on the agenda is not in attendance yet.
Okay. So then I think you can move on to 8 for the next few minutes. Move on, keep moving.
Okay, we'll skip over the designated 8:40 scheduled item. Move on to item number 8, approval of corrections. Is an action to approve a correction to Hesh Farms Incorporated parcel number 16000-10948-231-00. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments?
This correction is related to a DOT plat of an H lot to take more right-of-way from a landowner. The transaction actually took place in July of 2024. However, we didn't get the paperwork submitted to our office from DOT until just last month. So we still have time to do a correction, removing the 1.49 acres out of that tract for DOT right-of-way.
Okay, any other comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item B on corrections is action to approve a correction to Richard D. Howie, parcel number 40403-00200-002-00. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Comments?
Now, this is one of 2 houses. You probably remember hearing it on the news that suffered fire damage about a month ago on Madera Avenue in Brookings. Richard D. Howie property is actually the neighboring residence that suffered kind of collateral damage from the fire at correction number 3. So we're adjusting the value based on the physical condition of the property and the damage suffered during the fire.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carried. Item C, action approve a correction to Michael P. Tweet et al. At parcel number 40403-00200-002-05. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
A motion and second. Comments?
Now, this is the property on Maderi where the fire actually started, so the garage was a total loss. The house has been deemed unlivable. We've adjusted the value on this assessment down to essentially the lot value.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carried. Item D, action approve a correction to Brad G. Farber at X parcel number 32175-03800-006-00. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A motion and second. Comments?
Yeah, this is a property in Bruce that's a bare lot. It's a 20 by 100 strip of land that was on a former plat dedicated to be an alley right-of-way. The alley was never put in. The property owner has this adjoining to his property. However, from his property access, he doesn't necessarily have access, or it's not a buildable lot. So we've taken the assessment and applied a 50% reduction for lack of access and being essentially unbuildable.
Okay. Have any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item E, action to approve a correction to Robert Burnt Living Trust, parcel number 01980-11149-252-10. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments?
The property owner qualifies for ag valuation on this property. The reason it wasn't classified as ag prior to this is because we were lacking an application. The property or the parcel itself is under 20 acres, so it does not qualify. Even though the owner is running cattle on it, he submitted an application here after assessment notices were mailed, correcting the value to reflect ag valuation.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carried. Item F, action approve a correction to Tyler George Jensen et al. Parcel number 04327-11049-112-00. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
A motion second and comments?
Same scenario here. The owner applied for ag status and qualifies based on their application. However, it was submitted after assessment notices were sent out in the mail. The value correction you see is just going from non-ag to ag.
Okay, any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And I will abstain. Motion carried. Item G, action approve a correction to Northwestern Energy Public Service Corporation, parcel number 40357-00200-001-00. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments?
Yeah, the correction on this one is related to Northwestern Energy as a public utility company owning property. If that property is just bare land, it's locally assessed, which it was for 2024. Now there's a structure on that, so we need to correct the assessment to show a zero value on our side locally. That property is now centrally assessed at Department of Revenue.
Okay. Any comments?
Being new to the commission, can you explain a little bit more on centrally assessed? What that
Yeah, so centrally assessed pertains to properties that the state regulates what they pay essentially in lieu of property taxes, or their property taxes are calculated based on energy production rather than market value. When this property was purchased, it's on 22nd Avenue South on the east side of the road in the former Mills property. They purchased the lot a year ago. There was nothing on it. I think they ended up clearing trees and putting a natural gas substation on the site. Once it becomes operable, then the state regulates their property taxes in lieu of actual property tax based on energy production.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Pose same sign. Motion carried. It is now 8:40. Go back to our item number 6 on the agenda is a discussion and possible action on Tim Bauer appeal. Mr. Bauer, would you please come forward? State your reasoning. I think there is a microphone on there.
Wait, like,
Yep. If you can state your reasoning and.
the reason that I'm gonna appeal for the thing is, that I've owned the property since '93, and there's never been no improvements. In 2013, I've built a building, that was the last improvement that's ever been on this property. And all the other buildings, I mean, they're old and that, and every time I try to get any kind of loan through my bank and that to do some upgrading to my buildings and whatnot, the bank won't borrow me the money because they tell me the value of the buildings and that I want to try to preserve aren't worth the building to preserve on it. And my house was built back in 1930, and I'd like to paint in that, and I've been told by a couple different members of this board that if I paint that house, my taxes will go up again. And I just don't think by trying to make it so I don't look like I'm living in poverty is right for me to be penalized by these taxes going up. Like I said, I've owned it since '93, and them taxes have gradually gone up, and all of a sudden now, and the assessments haven't been done yet, and they go up $30,000. It just don't make sense to me, I guess. So, I guess that's the reason I'm kind of appealing, because I got neighbors around me that got houses that are 10 years older, or 10 years or newer, and their taxes, one neighbor's taxes went down $200,000, which I just don't understand, and all their buildings are 10 years newer than mine are. So I guess I'm just kind of curious of why and how, you know, like I said, all these years, it's never went up. I mean, it's gradually went up, but just bang now, $30,000, and yeah, assessments haven't been done yet. How can we raise taxes like that? I just don't follow that.
Okay.
Guess that's all I got to say. And I thank you guys for looking into what's for it and see if we can do something about it. But I mean, all my property are feedlots with cattle and stuff in. And when Jacob called me, he said, well, some of it's farm ground. And I said, no, it ain't. And he's pricing it at farm ground, and I just don't quite understand that when it's either trees or buildings or feedlots. So,
Okay.
guess that's,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Jacob, Assessor's Office.
So for the board's information, there was a policy change within the office that affected every ag property countywide between the 2024 and 2025 assessment. Historically, we valued all structures in the county based on replacement cost new. We're using Marshall and Swift cost tables that are given to us to supplement our computer-assisted mass appraisal system. They're relevant to January of 2020 today. So a value of a structure, whether it's 100 years old or whether it's 1 year old, it's valued at replacement cost new using January of 2020 labor and material costs. It's then depreciated by the age and the condition of the building. And then a factor may or may not be applied to that cost value as it relates to your assessment. Historically, that process carried through, and there was a 50% factor applied to ag outbuildings. I don't know the reason for this, other than when I started in this position back in 2009, it was in place and it carried through up until this year. And what was happening was, as you are probably all aware, many acreages are being split off of larger land tracts and sold on the market. When that happens, our office needs to assess those properties as close to market value as possible, and we were just falling short of market value on what's being paid for acreages. And a methodology that I saw fit to gain some ground on the assessments on acreages was to value those buildings at cost and no longer apply a negative 50 factor to that value. To put it into perspective, if you would take out a permit with the zoning office to put up a $100,000 pole building last year, you have a builder come out, put that thing up on site, we come out and do an assessment on it and value it, we're probably going to value it at close to that, what it cost you on cost based on what's in our system. But we would take 50% of that value away right away as far as tax purposes are concerned. What I did was I took that factor from 50 a year ago to an 85. So the whole process remains the same other than the last step of taking away half of the building value for taxation. Now we're only taking away 15% of that value, and my intent this year on 2026's assessment is to leave that factor, increase that factor to 100%. We want all market values to be calculated using the same process, valuing them at replacement costs, less depreciation for age and condition, and that's it. The market is telling us that there's no negative factor that needs to be applied to these buildings as far as the assessment is concerned in relation to market value. That was the only difference between 2024's assessment and 2025's. The original appeal says that the tax evaluation increased due to policy changes and no improvements have been made to the property. However, I just explained what our methodology change was that arrived there. It's important to understand that if we gained 50% in ag building value countywide or even specifically to your township, all that added value is considered reappraisal. It's not growth. The levy will come down to compensate for the percentage of reappraisal value added, just like when the productivity method values land and those numbers increase or decrease based on that 8-year Olympic average. That shifting of the reappraisal value will offset on the levy. It's not considered growth to the township. It's not new value where levies can be increased based on that information. So I guess my rebuttal to that would be the policy change has allowed us to value ag properties closer to market value by doing away with that 50% negative factor on the cost value of outbuildings.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? Mr. Post?
Yeah, so just to restate that, just because the assessment value went up the way that was calculated doesn't mean the taxes on it are going to go up, because we'll be setting a levy later that will probably be reduced from the current one and reflect that increase in assessment, and the taxes will remain relatively the same.
Yeah, that's a correct statement. It won't be a one-for-one. If your building value on your individual property went up 30%, it doesn't mean you can expect your tax bill on your ag buildings the following year to go up 30%.
I know, because when I got my assessment, I noticed the same thing, and I came and asked you about it, and you explained that. And that's pretty much what I understood, is that that doesn't mean your taxes are going up. It's just the assessments are getting, we're legally required to have the assessments close to accurate. And then the taxing, the levy end of it, will adjust to correct for that.
That's correct.
Okay, Jacob, on here you have local board action. Is that the adjustment the township thought?
Yeah, so both of the Bowers appealed to their local township board, and you can see on the first column what the assessment notice value went out at, split between land and structures, what the appellant's request was, and what the local board did as far as actions taken. Specifically on Tim Bauer's appeal, the land value that is derived through the productivity method, which is in law, if you qualify for ag valuation, you must use the productivity valuation method to arrive at the land value. It's considered to be market value in law. They took the productivity value and increased it above and beyond, creating an inequity, not in favor of the taxpayer. So first and foremost, I'd like to state that we need to correct the land value back to the value derived through the productivity formula. We'd be in violation of codified law if we didn't do that. And then the buildings were reduced. And I actually think that the board on their application had the values maybe flip-flopped, is what I'm thinking, but it's on record by tax class what they're doing with the values, and we need to get that back corrected to what it was.
That's what I was wondering, why the two numbers, it looks to me that it probably got put in the wrong column.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
I guess I would look, any recommendations by the board?
I move to approve to use the assessor's recommendation for the structures at 117.6 and the land at 47.1 for a total of $164,700.
I will second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll call the roll, please.
Vanderwall,
Aye.
Post,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Hostler,
Aye.
Jensen.
All right.
Motion carries.
Move on to item number 7, discussion and possible action on Dan P. Bauer appeal number 2. Dan, are you here? Please come forward and just state your name and your,
Dan Bauer, I'm here to appeal the property tax assessment. I guess the reason I was questioning it was because all the buildings that have been on my place have been around since I've been around, I guess. So some of them, I mean, they're not even usable for modern day farming practices. So that's why I guess I was using, and if something did happen to them buildings, the odds of them getting replaced are closer to 0 than they are 100%, I guess, by quite a ways. So that's why I feel that it wasn't right. But I guess Jacob explained that just because the value got raised doesn't mean the taxes are going to get raised the same percentage. So, I mean, I guess I understand better now. I guess that wasn't explained that well when we talked earlier before this meeting. So, but that's what my reasoning was for wanting to appeal my tax assessment.
okay, thank you. Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same process, basically. The owner was not understanding why no improvements being made to the property and the value could increase with that happening, explaining that factor process. And to further prove my point, this acreage here sold back in 2020 and the sale price was $485,000. As you can see, our assessment is just under $330,000 today. It becomes increasingly difficult to keep up with what's being paid for properties on the open market with a valuation process where we're initially removing half of the building value right off the bat. So I feel like the sale price, at least on this one individual sale, supports the process of increasing that factor from 50 to 85% and eventually to 100.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'd look for a motion from the board.
I move to approve the assessor's recommendation on this property at $239,500 for the structure and $90,200 on the land for a total of $329,700.
Second.
I do have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Post,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Hostler,
Aye.
Vanderwall,
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, back to approval of corrections. Item H is action to approve a correction to Stephen J. Timmerman at Ux parcel number 40255-001 00100-005-00. Do I have motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have motion and a second. Any comments?
This is a property that we attempted to review during our last cycle of Brookings City residential property review. Would have been back in 2023. At that time, when we stopped out to the property, the owner wasn't home. We hung a pink tag in the door for them to call for an appointment. Waited a few weeks. That didn't happen, so we sent them a letter in the mail requesting to review their property records for accuracy. Didn't get a response from them, so we did the best we could on the assessment from the outside of the property. The owner called and questioned their value increase in relation to percentages of other comparable properties within their neighborhood. And it was fairly evident that the reason was that there was some features to the home that were on the assessment that did not exist in the field. So the owner requested that we come and do a reappraisal on their property at this point. Of course, it was after assessment notices were mailed, so that's why we're bringing it to the board. But essentially remove some features from the property that don't exist, resulting in that value decrease that you see there.
Okay, any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item I, action to approve a correction to Devin Carlson et al. Parcel number 13370-11248-113-00. Do I have motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have motion and a second. Any comments?
Yeah, the value reduction that you see there is based on the owner qualifying for the ag status, a late application, but acceptable nonetheless. So we reduced the property value based on non-ag to ag.
Okay, any comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item J, action approve a correction to William J. Brown, parcel number 40504-00400-013-00. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Comments?
Yeah, this property is in the Reserve Edition in Brookings, down south on Christine. And if you're familiar with that development, all the houses look relatively the same from the outside. They all have an upper level dormer with a window in it. However, not every property or floor plan actually has upper level access and living finish in the upper level. When this property was constructed brand new and initially sold, kind of the same process, we went out there to do an assessment on it, hung a tag, no response, sent a letter, no response. The blueprints that were submitted to the city office and then submitted to our office showed upper level finish in this property. It does not exist. They must have changed plans or submitted incorrect plans. The owner was actually looking to sell their property here coming up next week, and kind of tipped them off when the assessed value was a little bit higher than what the market value indicated by the realtor was. I went out and verified that there is no upper level on that property, so the value reduction you see is basically removing that square footage that's not there.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item K is an action to approve a correction to Josh Slider. I don't have the numbers here.
I can give you the parcel number if you want.
Please.
Parcel number 16980-10948-01310.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments?
and I apologize for not getting this on the agenda, but the action was taken yesterday at about 4 o'clock. The owner submitted a late ag application. They do qualify based on their income that they provided from their Schedule F documents. The value that went out on the 2025 assessment notice was $268,100 on the structures and $61,000 on the land, for a total of $329,100. As an ag property, you can see that I recommend that the value be reduced to a land value derived through the productivity method evaluation at $27,000 and a building value of $205,500 for a total assessed value of $232,500.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Moving on to item number 9 is a presentation of the 2025 assessment of real property and building permit information.
All right, so I'll start into my presentation here, and if the board has any questions as I'm rattling off these figures, just let me know and we can approach that as they come. The assessments in Brookings County for 2025, as written in law, are as the value, or the value is as the property stood on November 1st of 2024. That's the legal assessment date in South Dakota. We have until March 1st to get the assessments for the current year out to the taxpayers for their information. We sent those out this year a couple of weeks early on February 11th. And what those values represented as submitted in my intentions document to Department of Revenue and audited and approved indicate that we will be at a median level of assessment on ag properties at 100%. And the reason being is because productivity valuation is considered to be market value written right into law. So unless we're not extending productivity values to these ag properties, we're considered to be at 100% of market value on our assessments. Therefore, the taxable factor on ag values remains at 85%. Meaning if you had $100,000 worth of ag value, you're paying tax on $85,000 of it. On the non-ag side, it's a little more difficult. They didn't just write into law that the assessed value equals market value, so we actually trend the market based on good sales from the prior year. And when I say good sales, I mean any sale that was advertised on the open market, any sale that did not have a relationship between buyer and seller, and also no pressure to sell that property like looming foreclosure or something like that. We're using those true market transactions to trend what we had on the assessments for 2024 to reflect what the market is showing us property values are worth in 2025. We ended at just under 88% on the median for our assessment to market value ratio, which means, I guess if I back up a little bit, it's acceptable according to Department of Revenue for that median value to end anywhere between 85% and 100% of market, not below 85 and not above 100%. As long as it falls in that range, then they apply a taxable factor for equalization. We ended at just under 88%, so that means the taxable factor on your non-ag value next year when determining your 2026 taxes will be 95.7% of that value. It's a good indicator that we're doing our job with a fair amount of accuracy if that taxable factor is less than 100%. You can see farther down on the page where we ended on total county value. Now these values are full and true values. They're not factored. They don't reflect any exemptions. This is just total value assessed 2024. The next column over shows the increase or decrease due to reappraisal. Now, when I outline the process on which all ag properties were revalued and the factor changed, again, all that value gained in that sector is considered reappraisal. So you can see how much reappraisal value we had countywide. The next column over shows allowable growth. Now, growth is any new value that's added to the county based on new construction. It can be value added to the county based on change between tax classes. If a property goes from ag to non-ag, the difference in value between those two assessments is considered growth at that point. And then you can see where we ended up countywide for total assessed value for 2025. The line below that I've segregated out the values that are in active TIF districts countywide. So in 2024, we had just over $220 million in total value within TIF districts. Now, within those districts, we show $65 million increase due to reappraisal. But a little caveat to that is we are not allowed to add any growth to an active TIF district until that district dissolves. And then there's a one-time kind of felled swoop of growth added for that district. So you'll see that there's no allowable growth. However, keep in mind that much of that value in the reappraisal column actually will become growth once the TIF district dissolves. Down in the center of the page in bold, you can see kind of how we have performed year over year based on the percentage of growth in relation to the tax base. And you can see that the growth figures as a percentage usually hover between 1% and 2%. If there's an anomaly to that historically, what that can be is one or more TIF districts dissolving in the same year and realizing several $1 million in growth at one time. But 2025 over 2024, I consider that to be a normal figure for growth. Down below at the bottom of the page, you'll see the exemption types that are currently on the books, the number of parcels that are involved in each of those exemption types, and the total amount of value that's exempt from that particular exemption. So just to summarize it a little bit for you, we have over 2,300 parcels out of the 18,200 countywide that are involved in some sort of property value and tax exemption. Total value being exempted from all of those programs is over $413 million. Just kind of for your information. Any questions on that section? Moving on to building permit information for 2025, you can see kind of how our office has remained busy for this year. Total permits issued in the county are actually down about 140 from the year prior. However, I feel like there was many permits still on the books at that time to replace buildings or repair damage from the derecho yet. That's kind of why I see that total number of permits issued decreasing from 2024. However, we are up on new house permits countywide. I have that broken down by how many new house permits were issued in Brookings City, in the small incorporated cities within Brookings County, and then also out in the township. We have about 10 more new houses, 125 new houses in the county this year than we did the year prior. Down at the very bottom of the list, you can see it goes historically back to 2015. That's the total parcel count countywide, and you can kind of see how that continues to grow year over year. I don't expect anything different for this upcoming year as well. The tentative numbers section here is if you remember my summary sheet that showed countywide values 2024, how much reappraisal, how much growth, and then as a percentage. This is just further breaks it down into individual townships. Shows what the value was total assessed in 2024, how much reappraisal, how much growth, and the 25 ending value, and as a percentage of growth. Any township, I guess we have one township in Brookings County that has an active TIF, that being Volga, so you can see those values are segregated at the bottom of that presentation to show Volga Township and then how much of Volga Township is in a TIF district. Pretty consistently, just over 1% growth. If you want to scroll to the next page, these are the same figures, but they're broken down into the small incorporated towns within Brookings County. Of course, we have several towns or cities that have active TIF districts, so if they do, you can see that value broken out. Important to look at line 2 for Aurora, and in 2024, we did not have any TIFs active in the city of Aurora, and you can see as reappraisal in the TIF increment, we have over $1.6 million that looks like it's added value. What that is it's shifting from being in the normal taxing district to a TIF district. So it's essentially a value shift. That's not value gained. You can kind of see too where we have some pockets of growth within Brookings County. Brookings City in particular is always strong on growth, but we're starting to see some of the development slow down just a little bit in Brookings City, especially on the residential side. That development has shifted more towards Aurora. We've seen a lot of development in Volga. We're starting to see increased development in White City. So I think supply and demand has kind of shifted some of the focus on house sales and new construction to some of the smaller communities out of Brookings, at least in this current year's snapshot. Then the last page is these same numbers here basically, but it's broken down by the school districts. We have 6 school districts in Brookings County, and you can see 2024's value, how much reappraisal was gained, how much growth, and then the 2025 value within each of those school districts. And these numbers are fairly important to the school districts as they're trying to go through their budgeting process right now, or just within the last month. They rely on these numbers, these preliminary numbers, for their information so they can start their budget process. Any questions on the 2025 figures? We'll start to get into our individual agenda items here. Next up, I believe, is the renewable energy parcels. So if any property has a renewable resource energy system in it, and it would qualify for a reduction that we call energy credit. So the value added, and most common, over the years, there's been anywhere from 20 to 30 of these properties that have had energy credit exemptions. We're currently down to 1 property that has an exemption this year, and it's in relation to a geothermal heating and cooling system. When those systems are added to a property and then we place those on the assessment, the added value to that property valuation based on the heating and cooling through geothermal, that value is exempt from taxation for a period of 4 years. As you can see, we only have 1 property that exemption started in 2023, and it'll carry forward to be removed in 2027. There's no application process for the renewable energy credit. There had been historically, but just now during our reappraisals or when we go to new house construction appraisals, if it's evident that there's an energy efficient system that's eligible for the exemption, we start that process automatically within our office. Next on the agenda, we have to approve applications that are for tax exempt status that are brand new. They're either properties that were acquired within the past year by a tax exempt entity, or they're properties that had existed prior and are now occupied and used by 501c3 exempt entities for their purposes. So we have 3 applications here, I believe, brand new, and they're all related to the same property. It's the agriculture's complex, I guess I would call it, over by the airport on 2nd Street South. There's several buildings on the property, and we worked with the owner, Kent Leibel, on this to, I guess, solidify what portions of that entire property are being used and rented by 501c3 eligible entities. And we verified that the square footages that are being used by those entities are for tax exempt purposes. So with your approval, we would apply, as you can see on the bottom of these applications, the percentage taxable and the percentage exempt. So for the first one here, the Humane Society portion of that property that's being used represents 12% of the entire property as far as total square foot of usage. So the application is for 88% taxable and 12% exempt. And then to compound on that, the second application is on the same property for a different business in a different space on that complex. Hope Haven Wheelchairs Ministry is occupying a 48 by 52 shop, and they refurbish wheelchairs and distribute them around the world from various countries. They have a 501c3. So that portion of the property constitutes for an additional 1% exemption. So you'll see the 87% taxable as a whole, 13% exempt. And then the third application is for the same property again for another space used by another entity. Brookings School District and Advance use 2/3 of a building, and Preferred Mechanical has 1/3 of the building. So after that's all mathed out, that equates for, on this building, a 33% taxable percentage and 67% exempt. I can assure you that these compounding percentages might be a little confusing here on paper, but we have it all worked out on the assessment for a total cumulative percentage of exemption as opposed to percentage of taxable.
Okay, and it's your recommendation to approve.
Yes. Yep, I've done my research. Actually, at the bottom, you can see there's a report of investigation section. So when these applications are submitted to our office, we speak with the owners, we go out in the field and verify that what's stated to be happening on the property on the application is actually happening, and I would recommend approval based on my investigation on all three.
Okay. I'd look for a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further comments?
But just so that I'm clear on this, their tax exempt status, that's an automatic thing. We just have to approve it
Yeah.
because of that.
So based on this application and their use in my report of investigation for this current assessment year, I'm requesting the percentage for taxable and exempt to be as stated on the application. Now, every year, and the next thing on the agenda is actually the list of continuing tax exempt properties. So these three applications are the only ones that are brand new in the county this year. But there's a list of a couple hundred that are continuing tax exempt. Those entities have to reapply on a short form like you see up on the screen there every year. The square foot occupied and the user and those things are all subject to change year over year. So we do an investigation on continuing tax exempt every year. Every fifth year, those continuing tax exempt properties must apply on what we call the long form. So there's several pages where they disclose more information to, again, re-verify that they're continuing to use that property for tax exempt purposes or not, for that matter. So I think we're 2 years out from doing the long form process. We'll further basically start the process over and investigate those for tax exempt usage and ownership.
So basically, we're just voting that we agree with your determination.
Correct.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Now this list here, like I said, is all the properties that are continuing tax exempt, meaning they were tax exempt to a certain percentage or 100% exempt in 2024's assessment and have carried forward for 2025. By law, our office publishes this list in all the local papers mid-March. That list was published and we had no feedback from that publishing. And if you scroll over, Stacy, to the right a little bit on that document, there's a third column that was cut off there. That letter on the right-hand column, that indicates the type of exemption that property qualifies for. C would be charitable, R would be religious, H would be health, B would be benevolent, and if we had any, there would be a code INC for incubator business.
Okay.
So I notice there's a lot of Habitat Humanity, so that's some of those building projects that they do to help,
Yeah.
it's considered a charity to get them started into a home.
Yep, they usually purchase, 5 to 10 lots at one start of one project, and then those properties are owned by Habitat for Humanity until the house is completed and transferred to the owner. That property qualifies for tax exemption.
And at the time they purchase it, then it's put on the tax roll, correct?
Yep, so when Habitat for Humanity or any exempt entity purchases a property that is currently taxable, they have to submit that single-page application to apply for tax exempt.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve tax exempt status exemptions?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 14 is an action to approve owner-occupied status applications.
Just for the board's information and for the listening public, the owner-occupied tax classification, what that does is it provides a 25 to 30% reduction in the property taxes paid to the school district in which you reside. It's for primary residences, or you'll see on that list there's some builder names on there. It's also eligible for contractors to apply for up to 4 spec homes that are to be sold as single-family residences for the owner-occupied tax reduction as well. The deadline on the application is March 15th, and like I mentioned earlier in the meeting, the assessment notices are due to taxpayers on March 1st, so that gives us a 2-week gap between when applications can be submitted for owner-occupied and when assessment notices have already been mailed out. The top portion of the list is owner-occupied statuses that need to be added to the assessments. There is one parcel on that list where owner-occupied status does need to be removed from a current residence. The reason being is that property owner notified us that he was going to be claiming owner-occupied status in Hamlin County rather than Brookings County for the current year. So we have to go through this process to remove owner-occupied status as well.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve owner-occupied status applications?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item 15 is action to approve the 2025 riparian buffer strip classification applications.
Just to be clear, we didn't have any new applications this year, but if you remember, the law changed to allow for applications back in 2022 to be approved and qualify for a 10-year window. So just reporting to you the number of parcels that we have with riparian buffer strip applications. Essentially what that does is it reduces the land value as ag within a buffer strip by 50%. And like I said, that application is good for 10 years. So we're going to be 2032 before the reapplication process starts again, unless something changes in law.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item 16 is an action to approve disabled veteran exemptions. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Comments, Jacob?
Yeah, so this program is for disabled veterans that have a service-connected disability. They no longer need to be rated at 100% disabled. However, they need to have the classification as being permanent and total. The reduction program also extends to the surviving spouse of a veteran who has died as a result of their service-connected disability. In 2024, the law allowed for up to $150,000 of assessed value to be exempt from taxation. For 2025's assessment, that figure increased to up to $200,000 of exemption. So you can see all of the property addresses that are involved in the disabled veteran exemption, and then down at the bottom right, the total amount of value being exempted from taxes as a result of this program.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Pose same sign. Motion carried. Item 17 is an action to approve a tax moratorium exemptions. Do I have motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. Comments?
Yeah, the tax moratorium is a program that relates to the restoration of homes that are on the historic register. These property owners have applied and gone through the process for approval through the South Dakota State Historical Society, I believe. And that information is then forwarded to our office related to the degree of the remodel and the approved on their end improvements to the property that would result in this tax moratorium. So what happens is they send us a list, and we have 2 properties here, and they say, you know, everything from the studs out has been replaced on this property. So we determine, based on their approval of projects, how much value needs to be added for that historical renovation. That value is then exempt from taxation for a period of 7 years. It's a one-time application. We have one property that has 2 simultaneous exemptions on it. Part of the project was finished in 2021, and you can see the value there under the loss column is the amount of value being exempted. And then the rest of the project finished up in 2022. So list of 3 there, but it's really only 2 houses in Brookings that are currently under this program.
Why the length of years till completion?
I don't know. That's just what they have written into law. I think somebody had that idea beforehand. I mean, it can be more expensive and time consuming to renovate a property and keep the historical integrity to it. And I think that was just what they saw fit for the program, is to allow that value added to be exempt for a period of 7 years.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carried. Item 18, action approved partially taxed exemptions.
Partially taxed means just that. These are properties that have tax exempt use and also taxable use on the property. So you can see the total assessed value in the left column and the amount of value being exempted based on their partial tax percentage on the second column. Just for example, we have First Bank and Trust. That's a taxable entity. However, their 10% of their square footage on their east branch is being operated as a employee child daycare, therefore eligible for a 10% exemption. So all these properties have continued with a partially taxed tax exemption, I guess, moving forward. The properties on the list that you saw prior in the presentation were all 100% tax exempt.
Okay. Do I have motion approved?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further comments?
Just all child care facilities have that exemption?
If they apply for it. Yep, the law allows for several reasons for property tax exemption. If you were to ask an attorney, which we have before in this process, it's not necessarily exactly what the facility is being used for, but what that income that they're getting from that portion of this facility goes to facilitate. If the income from that is going back into the tax exempt mission of the entity, that portion is then tax exempt.
Any further questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Pose same sign. Motion carried. Item 19, action approved discretionary formula exemptions. Do I have motion to approve?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Comments?
So discretionary formula is a program where new construction is rewarded through a process of the full and true value being added to the tax rolls in incremental value. You're eligible for discretionary formula anytime you construct a new ag building that values in our system over $10,000. Anytime that you construct a new commercial or residential commercial property that values over $30,000, or anytime you plat lots for development in groups of 5 or more. What we do is we take the full and true value of that property or that improvement and we add it to the tax rolls either in 20% increments or 25% increments. There's different programs. The ag and commercial fall under the 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, meaning in the 5th year after construction, that property is now fully taxable, or that improvement. Apartment properties have a little bit different formula. They're a 7-year cycle. You may remember that we wrote into resolution a couple years ago that apartment properties have a 7-year cycle, meaning year 1 and 2 at 25% taxable, year 3 and 4 at 50%, year 5 and 6 at 75%, and finally in the 7th year, the full value of that improvement is taxable. This list is sorted by parcel order. You can see the full and true value of the improvement on the property, the percentage as a reduction amount, and what year that exemption was started on that particular parcel.
Okay. Any questions?
Is this a in lieu of TIF type situation, or do they both apply at the same time in any situations?
Normally when you have a TIF district, the developer and the entity approving the TIF come to an agreement whether they're going to allow the discretionary formula to apply within that district or not. It's pretty consistent in Brookings County right now that if there's a TIF district approved, the developer will forego the process of being eligible for discretionary formula. I would say a vast majority of these are not in TIF districts. However, we do have a couple that are, in a TIF and taking advantage of discretionary formula because that has not been waived in the TIF plan.
Okay. Any further comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item 20, action to approve elderly tax freeze exemptions. Do I have motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments?
So you'll notice on this list that some of the parcels are highlighted with red text, and what we're showing you here is a list of all the properties and owners that qualified for the elderly or disabled freeze in 2024. The deadline on this application is April 1st. So this is a fluid document. We're processing these as the finance office gets these back from the owners. And the finance office, for your information, is approving or denying based on the income information provided, because there's an income, a maximum income threshold for a single individual or a household. The finance office will tell us whether that income level has been approved or denied. And what the freeze means is if you became disabled in a year subsequent to the current year or turned 65, what the assessment freeze does is, regardless of what the full and true assessment is for 2025, if you qualify based on your application, your assessment and what you pay tax on is frozen back to the year that you became disabled or the year you turned 65. So in some cases, the value might be frozen back to the assessment in 2023, and in some cases it might be a 20-year time adjustment. But I would say, regardless of how many years we're going back to the base year, this benefits these property owners that are on a limited income, because as we know, property values just continue to increase year over year.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
Yeah. I think I've got it figured out, but anytime there's a double listing, that's just there's 2 parcels in one property.
Yep, that would be right. They own 2 parcels that are adjoining and used as their primary residence. I should state that too. In order to qualify for this reduction, this has to be on their primary residence.
And when is the application for these due last fall?
The application is due April 1st, but as you probably remember too, the county by law has to accept those applications at any time throughout the year. The timing, however, indicates whether we can approve them at a board like today or whether we handle them as tax abatements after the fact.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 21 is adjourned as the Brookings County Board of Equalization. Do I have motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Have motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
Thank you, board.
Thank you, Jacob.